Good evening. Welcome to the August 7th, 2019 City of Murphysboro Planning Commission meeting. We will call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum present, so we'll get started with our meeting tonight. We have 5 public hearings. The first one is a zoning application for approximately 24.15 acres located along Shelbyville Pike to amend the marketplace at Savannah Ridge PUD to modify the site and building design. Baker Story McDonald is the applicant. Ms. Rush.
Thank you. Good evening, Commission. The property is located along the east side of South Church Street and north of Joe B. Jackson Parkway. It is comprised of 12 different parcels that total the 24.15 acres. On one of those parcels is an existing single-family residential structure that is vacant. These parcels would be combined for the commercial development once that would come forward. The marketplace at Savannah Ridge is a planned unit development. It was originally approved in September 2006 as a planned commercial development, and then it was subsequently amended in September 2017 to a planned unit development in order to allow for a mix of land uses, including 30 townhomes, 4 single-family detached residences, and approximately 195,000 square feet of commercial space. This current amendment that is requested is to change some of those items. It would be a reduction in the commercial square footage. It would, the proposal is to reduce it down to 137,455 square feet. There would be a reduction, or I'm sorry, an increase in the number of townhomes from 30 as currently approved up to 37 units. The 4 single-family detached residences that were approved are no longer proposed, and it would also relocate the majority of the stormwater management areas more towards the north portion of the property. The approved architectural design and character of the project actually is requested to be amended, and I'd like to refer the Commission to page number 18 of the pattern book. Page 18 on the pattern book shows what the architecture is proposed with this current amendment. I've also handed out to the Commission a handout that was part of the original approved pattern book. It looks like this particular handout. And you can see from the design, some of the changes are there is less of the stonework. There are more horizontal features and lines in the proposed building. There is brick. There is ephes quite a bit up towards the fascia of the building. The strip that is along the bottom of the current pattern book is from the original approved pattern book. What staff has noticed is that the proposed building that you see a blow-up of is not part of that design, so it is a different design. So I did want to bring that to your attention for purposes of discussion. Staff feels that this is not quite the caliber in the design and architectural features as what is currently approved, and would prefer to see it remain as the current approval. The comments that were made by the Planning Commission during the workshop a couple weeks ago were regarding the landscaping. And so I'd like to refer you all to page 23 of the current pattern book. It's an 11 by 17. And on that, you can see the proposed landscaping in the buffer areas. There is a buffer D landscaping that's proposed along the portion of the easterly property line that separates it between the residential areas and this development. And there's also a buffer B that goes along the Wycheck Lane and the Titans Circle streets towards the northerly portion of the property. This is similar, actually it's almost the same as what was in the original approved book, the same locations. The adjacent zoning for this property is planned commercial development with the Walmart development to the south. To the east is single-family residential, and those are developed with a single-family residential neighborhood. To the north, it is a property zone planned commercial development and is developed with a restaurant. And then the properties all to the west on the other side of South Church Street is in the unincorporated Rutherford County and developed with single-family homes. The future land use map of the Murphysboro 2035 Comprehensive Plan indicates that urban commercial mixed use is the most appropriate land use for the project area. And this project is a mixed use, mixture of residential and commercial development, so it is consistent. The Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing, after which it will need to discuss the zoning requested and then formulate a recommendation for the City Council. And I'm happy to answer any questions from the Commission regarding this project. Thank you.
Have any questions for Ms. Rush? And is there, we having any presentation, or are we just going to go ahead with public?
The applicant is represented, and the representative is here tonight.
Good evening.
Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Clyde Roundtree with Huddleston Steel Engineering. Thank you for the opportunity to briefly walk you through Marketplace at Savannah Ridge. As Marina has mentioned, it is an amendment to an existing plan development, so I'll be brief in my presentation. Thank you, Marina, for the introduction. I'd also like to mention I'm here with Mr. David Baker from BSM Developments. If there's any questions specifically for the owner, he's available. Mr. David Stahl is here from MJM Architects, so if there's architectural questions, he'll be the best to refer to that. And Mr. Bill Huddleston's here for any kind of traffic concerns that may be relevant to tonight's conversation. So with that in mind, as mentioned, it's a combination of parcels coming together. Right now, it's basically an open pasture land. The 24 acres is wide open, and it is bounded by development on every side for the most part. As Marina mentioned in the zoning, that's basically the zoning map that's in the book, but it is currently zoned PUD, and primary concern with the buffering is that area basically to the eastern portion where all the residents, single-family residences are. So we want to make sure we buffer that highly. This was the original approved plan, and as was mentioned, there's a reduction in the square footage for the overall development. And that's primarily in one building. One building was proposed originally to be 3 stories. That's the largest building on the plan, basically towards the left portion if you're looking at the screen. That was originally going to be a 3-story building, and now it's going to be basically a 1-story building, tall 1-story building. So that's where the reduction in square footage is located. We did, by reallocating the stormwater areas, we were able to get a little bit more commercial frontage with some of the buildings. We're still keeping the square footage somewhat similar with what's being proposed. However, along Joby Jackson, we do have another commercial property where that current stormwater area is. And as Marina mentioned, the stormwater has been concentrated towards the rear of the property. This is the proposed conceptual plan. On the top left-hand corner is where the townhouse increase is occurring. As Marina mentioned, we're getting rid of the single-family residences that were proposed originally. And as was mentioned, along Joby Jackson, there is another commercial building along that frontage where the original plan had a stormwater area. And that's the primary changes, really having multiple dispersed stormwater areas. From 5, we went down to 2, and they're larger in nature. Proposed phasing, obviously the majority of the portion is along the 231 as far as where the primary development is going to take place. It is a 3-phase development with the residential component being in the 3rd phase. The architecture, as was mentioned, Mr. Stahl is here to talk about that. From my understanding, work with the architecture, most of it's really textural changes and color changes. But Jeff, if you could come up and kind of allude to that. He's also got a materials board with him. He can walk you through that.
Would you like
Okay, just if you could give us your name and,
my name is Jeffrey Stahl with MJM Architects.
great, thank you.
I don't know if you'd like me to bring up the material board. Due to the changes of the layout of the building, as you see on the bottom of the screen, the building has essentially shrunk closer together, and in doing so, we decided to match the materials better to the grocer that is on the right, and also apply those same material changes to the small shops building which is in the upper right-hand corner. I guess it was mentioned that there was a fair amount of EVIS on this, which there is, but we've tried to maintain that in the signage locations, so that can be, easily repaired and reworked if any tenants change. And I believe there was also a question regarding it wasn't up to the same caliber as the original. If you could speak more to that, just so I can take those notes.
Did your comments to the chair? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, there was comments that I guess the architecture wasn't up to the same caliber as what was previously approved. I'm just
So
wondering.
that main picture that you're showing in the book now on page 18, it's just that one little section of the building that we're looking at. And if I look at the original building, that section, which part of,
That is the taller section of the original building. So the only thing that changed as far as that particular section goes is the color distribution, essentially, to better match the colors of the grocer.
so it looks like there's a larger section of, so is this the section you're talking about? Is that it right there?
Yes.
And so to the left of that section, so it's not an end of a building, which this picture looks like it's the end of the building, but the section to the left of the section that says tenant is just the expanse of the lighter colored brick that in here is a darker brick and looks to be smaller. I mean, it looks like that section kind of enlarged as well. I mean, looking at this picture, the large picture in the center, the only windows I see are the one right under the awning that says tenant.
Yes, that is the main entry for that particular
And so
tenant.
the rest of the way down that building, there's no,
Well, this larger tenant is the end cap now. Those 3 tenant spaces to the left of that in what was originally approved are no longer there.
okay.
So it is essentially now an end cap.
Okay, so if I look at page 15,
So,
that is, which building if I'm looking at the number 15, is that that main 27,000 square foot building, or?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Is it this building?
No, it's the building.
This building?
Yes, that building.
so help me understand it. So it looks like the top picture and the bottom picture are one's old, one's new. Is that correct? So the bottom picture relates to the old design,
Yes.
and the top picture relates to the new design,
Yes.
which is confusing for us, because we're trying to match these up to where they fit. Okay.
And so would all of this section up here, is this all new? Is this what you're proposing for new?
Those are new for the outlot buildings.
Okay. I have one other general question while y'all are looking at that. And I don't know if Mr. Roundtree will have to answer this or if you can, but you mentioned that this other building that was going to be 3 stories was now just 1 story. Is that true? So we need it to say 1 story in the book because the book says 3 stories.
Is this structure right here.
This building says 3 stories.
That's true.
Kathy, I think the point is that the square footage differentiation over the originally proposed versus the new square footages in that building. And so, yes, right now, I think they believe they have some sort of a fitness center or someone associated with that building that would just require the one story. So that's where the difference in square footage is. For the most part, most of the buildings are the same footprint. It's just a matter of volume. And I can adjust that in the book, but still has that 3-story on there.
It just says 3 stories. I was just going to say, we want to change that. I think the square footage got changed, but not the stories.
Correct.
Other questions?
I guess this is just a general one, so I make sure I understand. Are we saying that the material, the exterior material on the building is being substantially changed from all brick to the ephes? Is that part of what we're talking about, or no?
No, the original, which is the longer elevation that is shown, has a similar amount of ephes in the signage areas. It's just what we did was we took the building and compressed it to take off the end piece.
Okay.
But it's still mostly brick. The large panels with the horizontal striation on the side of that perspective image, though, that's all brick. That's not ephes. Just basically at the pilasters and at the tenant entries, we kept the ephes.
If there are no other questions, we'll open the public hearing. All right, thank you. We may have more questions afterwards. So we'll open the public hearing on this item and ask anyone to come forward that would like to speak. If you want to speak at our public hearings tonight, come forward and state your name and your address. And then you can make your comments, please, to the Planning Commission and not to the developers or other people of the audience. And you will have up to 3 minutes for your comments. So
All right,
please,
thank
go
you very
ahead.
much, Chairman, Commissioners. I live on Titan Circle. My name is Vince Luzak. I live on Titan Circle, which is behind this property. I couldn't tell from the visual what it was going to look like. They're talking about having a buffer on the Y-check lane and probably further south. But, you know, what's the egress in and out of this commercial property? Is it going to come off of Y-check? Is it going to come off of, you know, part of it I'm sure is going to be coming off of Shelbyville Pike, but there's going to be a lot of traffic going in and out of there. And I'm not so sure that it's really going to look that good. We've got a lot of traffic cutting through our neighborhood now, and with this additional property going in there, I'm not against expansion, I'm not against growth, but I want it to be, you know, viable growth. The other thing is, what do these townhomes look like? Are they tall 3-story jobs? Are they, you know, ranch style? What do they look like? If they're going to be tall 3 stories, they're going to look a little silly on the highway there. They're going to stick out like sore thumbs. And as far as, you know, the rest of the neighborhood, it'll be out of place.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Thank
And I
you.
didn't mention, we'll take note of all your questions, and then at the end of the public hearing, we'll address all the questions.
thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Anybody else that wanted to speak on this item? Okay, we will close the public hearing then, and we will try to answer those questions. Mr. Roundtree, you want to show us the townhomes up on the screen? And can you do that? Do you have the?
Page 19 of the pattern book.
I think we have a picture of
Be
the
the next one after.
residential. That's the, if you can go up on the screen, that's the townhome.
There it is.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's the, as was the neighbor was concerned about, that's the elevation for the townhomes that was submitted in the book. So they are 2-story townhomes, fairly typical. They're not the 3-story that we're starting to see a lot more coming into the area, the taller units. So it'd be more of an urban scale, consistent with the homes adjacent to it. And as far as the traffic's concerned, there's multiple exit points, and a lot of the traffic that would come out on Wycheck would primarily be from those townhomes that are on the border of the property. Basically, if you look at the illustration, they basically access Wycheck. They'll also have access to, I think that's, it's the road to the south. I think it's Manus Drive, I believe it is. I'm not sure exactly what it says here, but. And so everything else, as far as all the commercial development, that's all going to be going out to Joby Jackson and then on Church Street as well.
And I guess, Ms. Rush, you all discussed the connection between the townhomes being able to access back to the, is it Hyannis Drive? That basically comes back into the commercial section, and thought that was best for us to have that connection.
Yes, staff had looked at all the connections and felt that they were comfortable, including the ones off of South Church Street.
Mr. Roundtree, I have a question. That singular lot that's on the corner, the west side corner, when this came through originally, we brought up the kind of landscape buffer, and I saw on the plan that it mentions that in here, but I couldn't remember if that was an addition or if there's been any contact with that individual homeowner, because obviously, he's kind of on an island, or they are on an island in that particular instance. So I just want to be sensitive to what we're doing. I don't even know if they're here. They may not be aware, but from a planning standpoint, to make sure we take care of those people.
We have two different types of type B buffers that are being proposed, and one is really basically a line of evergreens, and that's consistent with, well, in his particular piece of property, it's basically a combination of evergreens, canopy trees, ornamental trees, and shrubs, a little bit more residential in nature versus commercial looking. If there's any concern with that particular neighbor, we can go with the type B buffer. It's just solid evergreens like a green wall. But right now, we just have it proposed as more of a little bit more of a residential look. He is backing up to those townhomes, so that's probably consistent with what he would want to see. And we can change it also if we need to modify the type B buffer where the stormwater area is and go with solid. We can go solid there. But we are sensitive to the fact that he is kind of on an island on that corner.
Okay.
Mentioning traffic flow, one of the things that I was concerned with when visiting the area a week or so ago was the ability to make the left out onto Shelbyville Highway. Has there been any further consideration of doing right in, right out there? My concern is that being able to take a left out of there, it's just too close to that turning lane. I mean, it's feet away from where that outlets, and that would be my concern on safety. Thank you.
Yes, I believe, by the way, I'm Bill Huddleston, president of Huddleston Steel Engineering. Thank you, Chair Jones.
Thank you, Mr.
That comment came up in the Planning Commission workshop a couple of weeks ago, so I went back and looked at the traffic study that was done originally, and more specifically look at that open intersection to see if it ought to be right in, right out. That intersection is part of the original TDOT design. There's 700 feet to the south before you get to Joby Jackson Parkway, and there's 950 feet to the north before you get to Savannah Ridge. Both of those are signalized intersections, and so they both provide gaps in the traffic. I was out there today to see, really, are we getting gaps? Are we going to get gaps in order to allow traffic to turn left out of this development and also turn left into the development? And I was able to realize those gaps with ease, actually. I even went down to Kroger to see what it would be like in a busier location, and I was able to get in and out of there utilizing gaps that were created by the signal. So the original traffic study and the original traffic plan is not changing as part of this proposed amendment. It has gone through significant staff approval. when it was brought up originally, and also TDOT approval. So we propose to keep that as an open, median opening that allows left turns in and out as well as right turns in and out. One thing I think we do need to do, and I can share this with you if we like, we need to make sure that that opening is signed and marked appropriately. This is the manual on uniform traffic control devices. You probably can't read it, but it shows how to properly mark and sign that median opening. Right now, there may be a little bit of marking out there, but they've been worn off, and that needs to be replaced and improved. And that'll be part of our site plan submittal when we come back to you for Planning Commission approval on the site plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huddleston. More questions from the Planning Commission?
I mean, I guess we still need to talk about the whole architect piece that Ms. Rush brought up. And if I'm looking at this, of course, it's hard to tell this bottom picture, but I get the fact that this is now an end cap, and then these that were to the left are gone. It looks like maybe the only difference that I can see is that the brick and the design that's to the right and the left of the tenant sign is considerably different than what was proposed originally. And then, just to be quite honest with you, it's hard to tell what everything to the right of the tenant sign looks like in comparison to the picture that we have at the bottom of the page. So, I mean, I just have a little hesitancy when staff brings up the design piece, and it's hard to tell with what we have what the difference is. And I don't know if you can help us with that or not.
There were several comments that from staff that we did respond to. I can understand from that particular image not being able to see what is to the right of that, or really to the left. That is something we can definitely address. The panels to the left and right of that tenant signage, those were changed from having, as you can see in the original, having a panel within a panel to more of a horizontal striation, which we felt better spoke to the language between the grocer that is going there, and because the building shrank, we wanted to still give it that presence without going too vertical, because we no longer had that the linear from the original inline.
So is it fair to say that everything to the right of this tenant space that's the grocer is similar or the same as what you originally proposed, or is that not a fair statement?
Yes, that is a fair statement to say it is similar.
Okay.
I'm trying to see. So when I look at the picture, there's not a lot of windows. But when I look at the bottom picture, there are a lot of windows. So I'm trying to. So the middle section goes away too?
Yes.
So you compress that. Okay. So I see what.
I think one of the things that's
I got
what's the most confusing for me is the one along the bottom looks like we used to have one continuous long, like a shopping center type thing. And really, if we look at what we have now, we have multiple buildings scattered all throughout. And so these smaller images over to the right, upper right side on page 18 may be a little more representative of what they're trying to present for these new buildings.
Yes, that's the smaller outlot buildings, which is more representative of the buildings and towards the west of the site, and also to the north of the inline.
And they have, I see the windows across those. And then, of course, I guess that one, the lower picture of those three is the back of a building.
I just want to make sure which one. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think from a legal standpoint,
Yes, sir.
A plan development book needs to give the Planning Commission and staff enough detail of
Clear.
what they're going to do so that when it's built, we'll know whether or not it complies with what they said they were going to do. From the questions that have been asked and from my casual observation of these pictures, I'm not sure that this booklet does it. I don't know how, with the questions, is this the back, is this the side, is this the front, is this the main store or some other store? That is not going to show up on the record, and there's no way that we'll be able to tell whether they met the plan or not. And I would have to recommend that we have some better architectural renderings of exactly what, not necessarily every building, but what the buildings are going to be and consist of and how much brick. We don't quite have standards of the gateway on this, but we still need to know what they're going to do for this body to approve it, and then for us to be able to determine afterwards whether they met what they said they were going to do.
So, Ms. Rush and Mr. Ives, if they could give us a better page or two for this, is that something that you feel could be handled with staff going forward if we can get comfortable with everything else, just this architecture? The fact that we can't tell by this book what we're approving. I don't know if everybody's comfortable asking staff for that, or if you all would like to see it again, so that'll be our question.
I mean, I don't want to delay it, but it's hard for me to tell. I'd like to see it again.
I bet, since we originally first looked at this in 2006, I bet we could look at it 2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to ask. If we can come back in 2 weeks with much more definitive nature as far as how the buildings represent from the site plan to the actual elevations that are going to be considered. From
We'd
my understanding,
appreciate
it's actually a higher quality look is really what they're shooting for, but we're obviously not capturing that with the page we have committed to the book. And I know working with Ms. Rush, we try to do our best to keep the books as comparable as possible so it wasn't confusing, but we'll go ahead and add more detail. That would help everyone out.
And I would ask that there be much more detail on the townhouses also, because that's a pretty blurry, distant picture. And it's, again, it's going to be virtually impossible to tell from the detail of what gets out there whether it meets the plan or not.
Okay.
Not a problem. We'll commit to that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before we have a motion?
If there are none, I'll make a motion that we defer, give them an opportunity to bring back the architectural design, and even if it's in 2 weeks, that would be great.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank y'all so much. Appreciate it. Our next public hearing will be an annexation petition and plan of services for approximately 1.01 acres located at 4431 Veterans Parkway. Overall Creek Partners, Inc. is the applicant. Ms. Rush.
Thank you. The property owner, Overall Creek Partners, is represented by Mr. Vijay Patel, and he has submitted a petition requesting the property to be annexed into the city of Murphysboro. The property is located on the west side of Veterans Parkway, north of Franklin Road. Simultaneous with this application is also a request to zone the property to commercial highway. The subject property is a single parcel. It has a single-family residence located on it that is occupied at this time. The applicant has indicated that there are no plans or any intention to develop the property at this time, so the residence would remain. The study area is located within the City of Murphysboro urban growth boundary and is contiguous to the city limits to the south and to the east. Staff has prepared a plan of services for the proposed annexation, and it is an attachment to the staff report. The analysis shows that the city can provide services to this property in its current condition, as well as if it ever does develop with commercial in the future. The subject property is only approximately 1 acre in size, measuring 110 feet by approximately 360 feet in depth. Any future commercial development of the site would require commercial driveway, type D landscaping buffering to buffer it from the residences to the north. And parking as well as the building setbacks would have to be consistent with that particular zoning district that they're asking for. Staff was not supportive of this annexation request due to the narrow dimensions of the property and the small size of the property. Similar to the project that we had just reviewed on the agenda, where they had compiled various parcels to make a more cohesive, larger development that kind of works with that particular area. That staff is wishing that that would also happen in this particular area, because there are 2 parcels to the north that are also 1 acre in size. Once you annex and zone this property as commercial, it does become an opportunity for it to develop, and with that small size, it tends to be a more piecemeal type of approach. Although the city can support the annexation in terms of services, so if it is the desire of the commission to recommend support of that, then that would be acceptable as well. The Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing on this matter of the annexation request, and then would discuss this matter and formulate a recommendation to the City Council. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions before we open the public hearing?
Ms. Rush, is this property currently, obviously it's currently in the county, but it's currently zoned commercial highway in the county, is that correct or incorrect?
That is correct.
What would prevent them from doing a piecemeal on those 3 lots today in the county?
If they are able and willing to develop commercial within the county, then they would be able to proceed with that as a standalone.
So we're not really changing anything.
One difference might be access to sewer.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, providing services to it, obviously, and the benefit
If they develop in the
fire
county,
and police protection and stuff like that, but
yeah, if they develop in the county, they may not be able to get sewer, which, depending on what they want to develop, may or may
Maybe.
not be an impediment.
right. But I mean, if we're simply trying to make a case of we're opposed to it based on the fact that it would be piecemeal zoning down through there, it's hard for me to understand because it's already zoned what they're requesting it to be zoned. They're just requesting the same zoning within the city limits, so.
Yeah, again, I don't know the specifics of the property to know what impediments they may have, why it hasn't already developed. Maybe it is a size constraint, which is likely because it is a small size parcel, or it could be just the lack of desire at this point. With the 2035 plan, the zoning that they're asking for, it is typical of the characteristics of the zoning district that they are larger parcel sizes, more consistent with what you see in strip centers, larger box building, commercial development versus the smaller local commercial. Those are often the smaller parcel sizes and smaller buildings. So it's just something to bring to your attention and for your consideration. Staff would be acceptable either way.
And again, Mr. Smotherman, I believe an impediment to development would be an inability to get sewer because your building footprint is going to be limited by the amount of space that you have to allocate to septic and field lines and that sort of thing. And so you'll get a substantially greater footprint of if you're in the city and on sewer.
Put field lines in.
And while we can't prevent them from doing something in the county, I think it's staff's position and policy to try to encourage a larger development as opposed to redevelopment of one lot at a time. We think it'll be a better development for the community, for the city, if something a little larger is undertaken.
Would it be more advantageous for us to consider it as a plain commercial development rather than commercial highway then, if you're wanting to have influence on how the property is actually developed in conjunction with the property next to it?
Yeah.
That would be a possibility, correct?
I think that would be a possibility. I don't know if this is working. Yeah, it is. That would be a possibility, or I think you could probably also recommend maybe the annexation is fine, but you want to bring it in at a I don't know, a residential zoning or something like that, to sort of limit it and put it in a holding pattern for this applicant, maybe to work with other property owners nearby or something like that. I don't know, those are just some thoughts as to sort of how you may want to approach it to hopefully in the future encourage some kind of coordinated development as opposed to the parcel by parcel.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess my opposition is certainly not to the annexation. I mean, or plan of services either. But I understand Mrs. Rush's concern as to saying we're concerned about how the property might access or have egresses and whether it would be stubbed into the property next to it. And I mean, I can see multiple concerns of why we would want to be somewhat more controlled over a commercial development or just a flat commercial highway zoning. That's all I got.
Okay. We'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak on this annexation and plan of services. Anyone? Okay, we will close the public hearing and continue any discussion and/or ask for a motion.
I would just like to say, Mr. Patel is a client of mine. I have no interest in this property. I will vote on it based on its merits. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salas. Any other questions or comments?
I guess my question might be for Mr. Patel. I mean, would he be opposed to the approval with residential zoning on it until it came in with
Plan.
I guess we would vote on the annexation.
Right.
I mean, then we can get to the zoning and see what we want to do there, because I think,
But I
like you
mean,
say, do we have any?
Yeah, I mean, if there's no other comments, I'll make a motion that we approve the annexation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
So-
Okay.
So before we go there,
Mhm.
so since it was annexed, is it automatic zoning to residential 15?
It would
It's
come
automatically
in as
as-
RS-15
as
without any
RS-15.
other zoning.
Comes in as.
No, it would come in as
Oh, since it was commercial in the
CL.
county.
Commercial local.
commercial local. And so if you want to make a recommendation on a different zoning, this next hearing would be the time to do that.
Okay. All right, so we will move to the next item, which is the zoning application for approximately 1.01 acres located at 4431 Veterans Parkway to be zoned commercial highway simultaneous with annexation. Overall Creek Partners, Inc. is the applicant. Ms. Rush.
Thank you. As indicated, the property is currently zoned in the county as commercial services, and the request is to zone the property to highway commercial simultaneous with the annexation. Adjacent zoning in the area to the east and south is commercial highway, and they are developed with various commercial uses. There is a commercial center and gas station proposed, but not built yet to the south of this property. The future land use map, Murphysboro 2035 Comprehensive Plan, indicates that auto urban general commercial is the most appropriate land use for the project area, and this is typically a high-intensity commercial businesses with large amounts of land area for operations, and they're typically developed with strip commercial centers, auto-focused uses, restaurants, and those types of things. The CH zoning that is requested is consistent with the general commercial land use designation. However, the parcel size is not consistent with the typical development within this designation. The staff is asking the Planning Commission discuss the compatibility of the zoning requested in regards to the subject parcel size and the 2035 plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions before we open the public hearing? Okay, we'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak regarding the zoning of this property. We'll close the public hearing, and I take it we'll have some discussion. Who's got questions? Comments?
Yeah, I'll just kind of go on the record. I'm okay, obviously, with the plan, annexation and plan of services, from the standpoint of bringing it into the city, but I don't know that ideally it would, I'd be supportive of the commercial zoning, for that, and that, for all the reasons we've talked about.
Commercial highway or
Commercial highway.
commercial local?
Really commercial anything. I think I'd be in favor of it being a residential, use only with sewer access and, plan of services to the city.
And I personally would be comfortable with a planned commercial development, but it has to be something that we know works with the adjacent properties. And that's my whole point of, I know it's gonna cost a little more to do the planned commercial development than just to submit a site plan for whatever it is he's gonna build here with no restrictions on it. But I think that from a planning standpoint, that we kinda have the obligation of trying to coordinate it so it works with the other surrounding properties. And otherwise, you could wind up with two properties on one side of it and another property to the south of it that would be completely separated and have no flow or consistency going up and down Veterans Parkway with a particular project stuck right in the middle of it. I think the commercial highway is just a little bit too lenient to just say it's commercial highway, go ahead and do what you want to do. I think that's asking for a little bit too much. Now, what would be the best way to handle this? Would it be better to make a motion just to turn this down? Because if you turned it down, I mean, I don't want to set him back in the sense that I don't want to delay his project if he does have an idea of something he wants to do, but I do think it needs to be either deferred or...
You could defer, you could make a motion to, if, you might want to check with the applicant and see what the applicant wants to do, but you might make a motion to go to RS-15 and then have the applicant come back at some point with the plan development, or after seeing if they can put some properties together to come back with a larger development at that point. That might be an option that you might want to consider.
Mr. Huddleston?
Thank you for allowing me to speak. You're talking about options. I was going to throw another one out at you. This property is 110 feet wide. It looks small on the map, but it's 110 feet wide. So what we can design is a 90-foot building that's 60 foot deep. That's a 5,400 square foot building. Would require 24 parking spaces. This lot's over 300 feet deep, so we can get those on there pretty easily. What I would propose is that we not ask for the commercial highway. We ask for commercial fringe, which would be more appropriate, I think, and then we would be looking at a site plan for the 5,400 square foot building, which would be some kind of retail and or office, and we would try to tie cross access with the property to the south, which is a design that I've already designed and y'all have already approved, but I'd be more than happy to propose cross access between those two also.
Mr. Olson, can I ask you a question? So I presume, based on the square footage you're talking about a rectangular building.
Yes,
that
it
will
would
have
be 90 feet wide and 60 feet deep, so you'd have 1, 2, or 3 uses in that building.
Which means the back of that would be to the residents to the north.
That's, the side of it would be to the residents to the north, and the back of it would be to the property to the west,
Okay.
which we are talking to a client who's wanting to do a mixed use back there.
I just, in my mind, wanted to make sure it wasn't a long rectangle that was going to be backing up to the side of someone's house.
Correct.
But it would be the long side of the building, right, Mr. Huddleston?
The long side of the building would be facing west, which would be facing our other client's property who's looking to do a mixed use commercial and townhome
Can we bring
type
that up
development.
on the large screen, please?
This is west, so yeah, south is,
So that 90 feet wide is facing the road, is basically what I
Be
need.
facing the road, and the
That's
back of it would be facing that large tract that sort of wraps around and fronts on both 96 and Veterans Parkway.
Okay, all right, thank you.
and all the parking
Would be in the front.
in the front.
And the parking lot for the yellow property to the south that you've already approved has a parking lot in the front of it that we could connect to easily if they're okay with it. But we'd probably have our own access on Veterans. We'd propose that as well.
Staff didn't want to imply that it would not be able to fit no development in this particular zoning district. So as Mr. Huddleston described, that is a development that would fit, and that is our concern, is that it would be one small building with parking in the front, and it would have its own driveway, and then you've got two parcels to the north, which could also subsequently annex, develop with driveway. So it's that lack of cohesion is what we were concerned with.
Could we require a stub out on both the north and south sides of the property in case there were developments? And Mr. Huddleston's already said that he would agree to stubbing on to the south side.
Yeah, we could
So-
leave a stub to the north property too that they could connect to if they
So
wanted
that
to.
way you could flow through the parking lots of all of them without having to go back out on Veterans Parkway if you were using multiple businesses down through there.
I sort of recall that the one to the south, that is the back of that building,
It's an
that would
L-shape.
face this property.
That's correct. It's an L-shaped building.
So I'm not sure how the interconnection of the driveway, unless, are you,
There's a parking lot in the front of that L-shaped building along Veterans.
I know there's a driveway right there where it's close to the property line, and I can't recall if there was parking in front of that side of the building or not,
There was parking in front of that side of the building.
one row.
One aisle with parking on either side of it.
If it could become a cohesive development with the development to the south, I mean, that is the goal that is very good and preferred from a planning standpoint.
So, Ms. Rush, though, are you asking that there would not be access directly onto Veterans Parkway from this development that we're looking at?
As he's describing it, yes, because there is a driveway for the development to the south that's in the northeasterly corner or portion of that property to the south. The property to the south is I think it's a planned commercial development, if I'm not mistaken. Was that no, it was commercial highway, actually. It was commercial
Yeah,
highway.
we had 2 or 3 zonings on it that we discussed, and I can't remember
But it
exactly
is,
where we.
Into-
What I
one to the
could
south
do
is-
is sketch something up, and we could look at it in a couple of weeks.
So long as the parking was consistent, that the parking on the southern property coincided with the property in front of his, that we're looking at, that
building
runs along
side.
Veterans Parkway, and had a deadhead, or whatever you would refer to it as that would go to the next property, so that there could be some flow between the parking. I mean, I'm okay with commercial highway as long as it's got that, but I don't know if we can put that limitation on it if it is commercial highway. I mean, and I don't even have a problem with it having access to Rutherford Boulevard. I mean, I think in fairness to that business owner, he ought to have access to.
Yeah, I'm not ready to give that up
Rutherford
yet.
Veterans Parkway. I think he needs to have access to his property, to the roadway. But on either side of the parking lot, you ought to be able to access out into the other parking lots, so that if you are doing business next door, you don't have to go out onto the roadway and then immediately turn back into a property that's right next to it.
Correct.
And I do want to say just very quickly, and I feel obligated to do this and to always tell you that an applicant can commit to a lot of things with bulk zones, and Mr. Huddleston and his client are both great people. We can't hold them to it with a bulk zone, so just always sort of keep that in the back of your mind. Once that zoning district is given, it is given with all of the entitlements that go along with it.
So if we were to defer it tonight, could they bring that back to a daytime meeting and we can vote on, because it would be something lesser than what we've had a public hearing on.
Yeah, so,
Anything that we would, could approve is less than a CH.
I think that's fine. I think as long as you've conducted and closed the public hearing, you'd be fine to bring it back up.
I closed the public hearing, didn't I? As opposed to if we made a motion for an RS-15, then they have to go back through and apply for a different zoning and come back through again, and that delays it many more weeks, so.
I mean, I would be more comfortable with this if Mr. Patel would come to the microphone and tell us what he plans to do with the property. I mean, as far as what the plans for the property are, because, I mean, I think that would be helpful. I mean, I trust Mr. Huddleston. If he tells me he's gonna do something, he's gotta come before us again at some point. It's not a good idea to come up here and tell us he's gonna do something and not do it. So I mean, I'm comfortable with Mr. Huddleston's word. Mr. Patel, I think what I'm asking for is your word as to what is going on this property, so we have some idea of what it is we're approving.
Right, and this is Vijay Patel. We are basically thinking at this time do something retail. We don't know per se or anything like what we're gonna do exactly, but it'll be something retail.
With the building, like Mr. Huddleston just described,
Right,
parking, access, all of the
according to
things.
the
that
code,
you-
whatever the maximum size building we can build.
And I know, Mr. Patel, you'll be before us again at some point as well. But are you comfortable with having access to your property from both the north and south sides into your parking area?
Yes,
As long as you retain your access
Right.
to Veterans Parkway?
yes.
That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, I do believe that the Planning Commission can recommend a condition on this zoning. Negotiating an agreement, of course, we can't do unless it's a planned development, and then we can do it. But in straight zoning, we can't do it by agreement. We're not supposed to do it by agreement. But the commission and council do have the power to impose conditions. They can accept those conditions or not, but I believe that whether it's highway or the lower commercial zoning, condition that there not be a direct access from this property onto Veterans would be a valid condition. If we if we zone it, then
But I don't think
they would
that's
have
what
an
they're
absolute
talking
right
about.
to that. But I think if we impose that condition on it, I believe that would be a valid condition. And one of the concerns is, I think, because as I said, there's a planned driveway on the northeast corner of the corner lot. And we could possibly have 4 driveways with people trying to make left and right turns in and out of those 4 properties very close to each other. That would not be good development, would not be good traffic management. Now, I don't know what kind of a median there is there, if anything, that might limit some of that, but still, 4 driveways right there would not be a good thing to have. So I believe if it was zoned commercial but conditioned on no access, I believe that would be valid.
And I don't think that's what the applicant wants. I think we may be better off to, Mr. Huddleston.
Yeah, I'm going by memory on this property to the south. I don't think the access is right at the northeast corner. I think the access is a little bit south where you pull in front of the L. And that's why I'm proposing that we defer a vote tonight, and I'll bring back a sketch in a couple of weeks, and we'll all feel more comfortable about what this thing's gonna look like.
There you go. I'll make a motion for deferral.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you. All right, our next item is a zoning application for approximately 20 acres located along North Academy Street, East Loki Avenue, East Embry Street, Christie Court, Palm Court, and Chaton Drive to be rezoned from RD to PRD, the Oakland Court PRD. Murphysboro Housing Authority is the applicant. Mr. Anthony.
Thank you, and good evening. It needs about 3 more streets in it, and that would make it complete. Murphysboro Housing Authority has requested rezoning of approximately 20 acres from duplex residential, or RD, to planned residential district, or PRD. The property is currently home to Oakland Court, which is a 76-unit public housing development. The proposed PRD would include 150 units across 2 phases. The first phase would consist of 76 units, which would replace the existing Oakland Court development. And the second phase would consist of 74 units, which would replace the existing Mercury Court development, which is located along Mercury Boulevard. Adjacent zoning for this property includes RD on the north and west, CMR and CM on the east, and RM16 on the south. Adjacent land uses include a mix of residential types on the northwest and south, and the Oakland's Mansion, wetlands, and park adjoin the property on the east and southeast. The Murphysboro 2035 land use plan indicates that the most appropriate land use for the property is multifamily residential, which is characterized by multi-story, multifamily buildings with a density of up to 19.93 dwelling units per acre. The proposed development would have a density of 7.5, which falls within that guideline, but it would include some single-family detached residential structures, which is slightly different than the multifamily residential character described in 2035. The applicant's pattern book includes a parking exception to reduce the amount of parking from the required 608 spaces to 350 spaces, and the applicant's rationale for that exception can be found on page 32 of the pattern book, and we'll ask the applicant to discuss that in a little more detail shortly. Finally, per the Planning Commission's request, the applicant has added a detail for solid waste pickup to the pattern book, and that can be found on page 49 of the book. I came in right at the beginning of the meeting, so I have no idea who else is back here. Margaret Butler. Margaret Butler is the applicant's representative and has a great team with her. She has a presentation for you, and after her presentation, the Planning Commission should conduct a public hearing. Staff can answer any questions either before or after the public hearing. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank
Hello,
you.
Chairman Jones. Thank you. My name is Margaret Butler. I'm with the architectural firm McCarty Holdsapple McCarty, and we are serving as the lead architect and have led the master planning effort for this property. Tonight I have with me Thomas Rowe, the Executive Director of Murphysboro Housing Authority, Charlie Teasley, their chair of their board, Kevin Gunther with Reagan Smith, who's the landscape architect on the team, and Bill Huddleston, who is the civil engineer as well as traffic engineer for the project. So, do we have? Okay.
Sorry. No, that's okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So this is, as Mr. Anthony mentioned, the redevelopment of the Oakland Court property. We've titled this A New Neighborhood Reconnected, because that's really the main thing that we're trying to do, is reconnect this neighborhood to the surrounding properties. Some illustrations of the site photos. I'm sure you're very familiar with the property. It is adjacent, as he mentioned, to the Oakland's Mansion, and it's comprised of 76 homes that were developed on the original farm of the Oakland's Mansion when the property was purchased, and they first moved into those homes in about 1960. He reviewed the current zoning and the surrounding zoning parcels. We've included this slide to illustrate that we have made, through the master planning process, made a very extended effort to reach out to the community and involve them in this planning process. It was a 3-month long process. We held 18 separate meetings with, that ranged from the Oakland's Mansion Board, public meetings, resident meetings, stakeholder meetings, and the schedule is outlined there in your booklet. And it just shows how we met in March, April, and May with the community. And one in April, we're there for 3 days and really designed on site to engage the community and respond to their comments in the process. The program or the goal for the property is outlined by some of the restrictions and of the RED funding that will be pursued, which states that when the Housing Authority takes the homes from Oakland Court, they will also bring the residents from Mercury Court, another one of their projects here in town, and consolidate that all on this property. They'll be putting back the same types of homes that are there now in terms, I mean, they have so many 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and those same families will be able to move into those same configurations of 1, 2, 3, 4 bedroom and up to 5 bedroom homes. So that's what establishes the program. This is a large project. What we're coming before you tonight is rezoning the whole parcel, but it will be constructed in 2 phases. Phase 1, as illustrated there in the blue, will be the first phase that will be completed at the end of 2021, planned to be completed then, and it will comprise the 76 homes, the relocation of the 76 homes, households that are there now into that first phase. The orange that you see indicated there is the second phase, and that's when the Mercury Court, 74 Mercury Court residents would move over and take that and take the homes, move into the homes that are provided there. This is an illustrative master plan showing how we propose to place the 150 homes. As I stated when I began, the idea of this development, whereas we are housing a lot of households here, is to reconnect it into the surrounding community. And so it's not like a garden-style apartment or anything like that. These are all single-family duplex, and there are a few triplex to kind of keep the scale down, and I'll go into more detail on that in a moment. And the idea is that they would be placed, they will front the street, they'll all have front porches, and the parking will be placed behind the home so that the parking spots can be close to the actual unit and it'd be a convenience for the homeowners. This gives you a little idea about some of the important features that were discussed in the planning process by the residents and community alike, and making sure it's a healthy community, providing space for individual garden plots, walking trails, having a small pergola with the character of what you see down there on the bottom of those photographs, and making it an accessible and an easy, have an easy relationship to the Oakland's Mansion. I'll go back one quick moment, and I don't know if I can take my cursor here. One thing I should have mentioned, currently the property has some cul-de-sacs in it. Those have now gone away. We've reconnected. This main East Loki coming in comes into the property. It's terminated by a pergola here that creates a new entrance to the park that's developed next to the Oakland's Mansion. Currently, there's a fence in this location, and homes currently back up to Oakland's Mansion. And the idea here is to kind of restore a park setting for the next to the Oakland's Mansion, and that park is now a feature and a focal point of this new community, as well as an asset and a restoring feature to the Oakland's Mansion that is located here in its park. It'll be provided with 1,250 linear feet of walking trails that will connect to the walking trails that are in the park. And so the idea is really to reconnect not only this new community to the beautiful park and assets there for Oakland's Mansion, but as well provide a welcoming avenue for the rest of the residents in the community to pass through this new development and be welcomed into the park and the Oakland's Mansion property. So I'll move forward. This is a blow-up showing how that park, Oakland's Mansion, sits in this location. Just a little detail showing how that at the end of Loki, or Medical Center Parkway, as it comes and it dead ends here, they'll be welcomed by a pergola structure that can also serve, it'll be covered, it can also serve for residents that may be waiting on public transportation or bus, a school bus or something like that. Getting to the parking count, as Mr. Anthony suggested, it was a little bit of a head scratcher when we came to how many parking spaces do we need. So we first started with asking the Housing Authority, how many cars do the current residents have that are in the Oakland Court and Mercury Court developments? How many residents, how many cars they have? They currently have 137 cars for those 150 homes. That's 0.9 cars per unit. And the zoning, as you know, would require for a single family or duplex 4 cars per residence. And so there was requiring the 608, and so there was a great discrepancy there. So what seems to be a common sense approach that would provide well more than the current cars they have on site. So what we did was we doubled that. So each residence would have 1.8 cars per that unit. So we'll be doubling the amount of cars that are actually owned by the residents now. It's for 270 spaces. And then we wanted to provide additional 30% for guests of those families. That's an additional 80 cars. And so our total recommended is 350 to have, and that's what's illustrated on the plan you have today. We've made sure that those parking, what we call parking courts behind the residential blocks, each of those residents would have an opportunity to have access to at least 2 parking spots in there. So we feel like that well exceeds what they're currently using now, but is indeed short of what a typical, maybe more suburban type residential component need would be. So you can come back if you have any questions. This diagram illustrates the streetscape and the setbacks. We envision tree lined. All the streets will be tree lined. There will be a landscape buffer between the street and the sidewalks. All streets will have sidewalks. They'll have a minimum 10-foot front yard setback and then a facade zone that each home will have, as I mentioned, a front porch, and that would fit somewhere in that. As it's meant to emulate the neighborhood around it. As those neighborhoods historically grew up, every house is not perfectly aligned, and so this type of setback arrangement allows that to kind of grow organically but still be in the same idea. We have suggested landscape planting, and Mr. Gunther is here that could answer any questions you may have about that, but looking at foundation planting, understory trees, and as well as the street canopy trees. His firm has developed, it's hard to see in this level of detail, and perhaps you can see in your booklet better, but developed a landscape plan of how those trees would be placed. I should point out in the center of the parking courts, we'll be doing some water quality planting to help with the storm water. So that will be handling the storm water in an attractive fashion, and I think would add to the overall ambiance of the development. We made quite a concerted effort to study the existing and surrounding community, neighborhood homes around the neighborhood, identifying the architectural styles, and you see 6 of those represented here. And as we get into the architecture and the actual detailing of the homes, those key features will be replicated and respected. Here's an example where you're seeing just a snippet of a streetscape I should point out in the upper left-hand, you see that large, which looked like a large green home there. That's actually a triplex. The effort will be made to make sure that it doesn't look like repetitive townhomes. When you have a duplex or a triplex, we'll try to design those so it looks like a large home. But each resident will have an area, front porch or side porch that they can call their own. This next diagram just illustrates where those different sizes of homes will be. The chart there to the right illustrates, the top one says Phase 1. That tells you how many one-story, one-bedroom duplexes we'd have, how many two-bedroom, two-story duplexes, and so on. And you see the total square footage that will be developed, around 75,000 square feet. And then the farthest right column indicates that some of those, so we don't have a lot of cookie cutter idea. Those homes where they might have the same floor plan will also be developed in multiple styles. So you'd have one unit and you'll have 3 of one style and 4 of another, that type of thing. This illustrates the materials that will be used. There is some restriction from the THDA, the Tennessee Department of Housing, that will be funding part of this, or working that the Housing Authority will work through to get this. And one of their requirements is that there will need to be 40% brick or true stucco that will be used on the property. And because historic homes don't automatically all have 40% brick or stucco on them, they have been very lenient with us, and that we will use, as you see in this photo of a craftsman, that's a very typical way you'd use brick as a foundation, and we'll be doing that. And when we need to up the percentage of brick, we may do some full brick homes that gets that. For the overall development, it'll be 40% brick or true stucco. We'll be using hardy siding and detailing. We will have a 30-year roof, asphalt, fiberglass shingle on the homes with the dimensional look. One other thing in the top left, I mentioned the stormwater plantings we'll have in the courts, but we'll also be using a permeable paving under the cars that will help also address the stormwater needs for the property. And lastly, Mr. Anthony mentioned the pickup and screening. I understand that was a question last time that you looked at this, and so what we've done is taken an example of the plan here to illustrate how each home would have a screening, something like this. You see in that bottom photo, screening from the public street, and would have a paved means to get that trash receptacle to the street. So the idea, as we understand, for the city is to pick up individual cans there at the street, and so we'd have a way for each home to have a screened receptacle and a paved way to get that down to the street for pickup. So we had an illustrator on board in our team in the planning, and we just wanted to quickly share the before shots with the mansion here and our property in this location. Idea of how that would change in this park, and additional park restored to the city park around Oakland's mansion. And this is North Academy in this location, looking down Loki, and that's what it will look like, with a focal point there, pergola there at the end, and the walking trails and the parks. The homes that face that park will be some of the bigger buildings, the triplex and duplexes, that will kind of have this appearance of a large home, this more stately manor home. And this is looking north along North Academy, and that's how it will look with the homes as they face the street and the street trees. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Very, very nice. Y'all have questions for Ms. Butler before we open the public hearing?
These here.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. We will open the public hearing for this item and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak, either for or against. Okay. There's nobody. We will close the public hearing and ask for comments and questions from the Planning Commission.
I'll just start by making a general
Start us
comment.
off. All right.
I think the work on this has been excellent, the effort that the Housing Authority has made to be open and communicate with the community. I know I've attended a lot of those meetings, and the work and even the redraft and the editings for the solid waste plan of kind of listening to the commission and trying to address those concerns. I appreciate that. I think it's been very well done. I know probably the only thing I have seen or heard that is any of a concern is the parking situation, but in doing the data collection that you've done on the current number of cars that you have there and knowing that you're going to double the capacity for what we're getting in the community with, I think, the improvement and the integration with Oakland's and the partnership that you all have had there, I think it's a great project, and I'm excited to have it here, so thanks for all the good work.
Absolutely. Other comments?
Ditto.
Yeah, really, big
Ditto.
ditto. Really nice.
On page 49, there is, it's easy to look at the picture and understand where the trash cans will be located next to the roadway from the units across the bottom of the picture. Across the top of the picture, the ones who have the courtyard area, obviously they can't go to the courtyard area with it. Where will they be carrying those trash cans to? Will they be?
They'll come out to on the bottom, let me see if I can go back.
It's on the screen.
What did you put? Oh, it's on
Our
the screen,
screen, yeah.
okay. I tried to, so the park that you see there along Loki, it has a public sidewalk that runs to the front of those homes. We tried to get on the homes, so those are the main ones that'll have to go the furthest.
Right.
And we tried to get the trash, we'll be putting the trash on, say let's see, can you see my?
There's just 6 cans there that we're concerned with. I mean, it.
Yeah, they would come out here and they'll have to roll down to
Academy or.
Jeton and these homes will have to roll to Academy, basically. But, yeah, it's a little further. They're gonna have to go one lot over, but I don't think it will be probably prohibitive, maybe like a long driveway or something for most
Right.
folks. Yeah, those are the units that would have the longest way.
Yeah, the only difference there is generally with every one of the other ones, there is a connection of the sidewalk going out to the street for a place to drop it. When you get to the end of that sidewalk, if you go, well, looking at the picture, if you went to the left, there are no drop points there. It almost looks like there needs to be some drop points for trash cans on that island between the sidewalks so that we don't wind up with the trash cans in the street and we don't wind up with them on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think with just a simple change right there, that could be taken care of.
That's a good idea. Yes, we can expand that for sure.
It's a beautiful project, though, and I think it's going to be really, really good for the neighborhood. It's all the way around it, and it hopefully will set a precedent that we will continue this over to the other side of town on Mercury Boulevard once we get this project completed. So.
certainly took a lot of work by a lot of different people all working together to get it all done, and I'm amazed at the number of public hearings and meetings that you all had, and just appreciate all that hard work. It was excellent. Staff and everyone working together on that. Guess we're ready for a motion.
I think we all probably want to make this motion. But I'm going to jump
We
out
know
there.
who wants to make this.
I'll jump out there in front and say, I'll make the motion to approve this one.
All
Second.
right. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you very much. Congratulations. Great project.
Work.
All right. Our last public hearing tonight is a zoning application for 14.55 acres located west of New Salem Highway and Warrior Drive to be rezoned from LI to GI. Charles B. Mitchell Jr. is the applicant. Mr. Anthony.
Usually if there's not a name beside it, that's bad news for me, isn't it?
Yeah.
The applicant, Charles Mitchell Jr., has requested that a 14.5-acre property located northwest of New Salem Highway near the western terminus of Warrior Drive be rezoned from light industrial, or LI, to general industrial, or GI. The general industrial district is our newest zoning district, and it allows for some manufacturing uses, but does not allow for the most intense we'll just settle with intense industrial uses. Adjacent zoning includes LI to the north, east, and south. The Stones River and a city greenway are located west of the property, and then the property on the other side of the river and greenway is zoned RS10. The Murphysboro 2035 land use plan indicates that urban, commercial, and mixed use is the most appropriate land use for this property. The request for GI zoning is not consistent with the land use plan. However, of course, the Planning Commission and City Council have the discretion to vary from that plan when they deem it appropriate to do so. I will tell you that there may be a significant economic development opportunity on this property, and that is what is driving this particular request. The Planning Commission should conduct a public hearing, and staff can answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Anthony before we open the public hearing? All right, we will open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak either for or against this item.
Hi, thank you, Chair Jones and Planning Commission, for the opportunity to speak on this project. I'm a resident of Murphysboro. My name is Barbara Higgins. I live over on that side of the town, and I use the Greenway frequently.
And your address is?
718 Oakwood Circle.
Thank you.
37128. I've been looking at this plan pretty carefully. I think that staff already recognizes that it's not consistent with the 2035 comprehensive land use plan. I would note that more intensive use on this property would not be an appropriate instance to deviate from the comprehensive plan. The reasons are to the west, the uses are residential, already zoned, I think R15 and R10, with the Stones River right next to it, and then the Greenway right next to it. I don't know what kind of use what the prospected use is. The staff report doesn't say what the prospective use is, but it does provide a use chart in the back. I would note that any of those uses in this area seems to be completely inappropriate with the surrounding uses of both the park as well as Stones River as well as the residential area. Those uses contain both toxic manufacturing as well as nuisance-like industry. Those would include abrasive products, automobile products, lumber and wood products, rubber and plastic products. So it's very disturbing to me that somebody or an applicant is coming forth and requesting a zone change for a more intensive industrial use with that's adjacent to uses that are incompatible with these types of industrial uses, especially with the park and the greenway right next to it. The other point that I would like to point out in looking at the map, under the comprehensive plan, it appears to me that the city had a very intent usage of this area and kind of a vision for this area that doesn't seem to have any justification for deviating from that planned use. If the comprehensive plan recommends that this area be urban commercial mixed use, and when you look at the recommended designation of urban commercial and mixed use next to the general commercial as well as the residential uses as well as the parks, that seems to me to be much more consistent. And if this area is rezoned to a medium industrial intensity, yes, medium industrial intensity, that seems to me to kind of ruin the entire vision that's under the plan for this area. Thank you. Sorry to take so much time.
Hello, my name is Mariah Phillips, and I live at 1332 Dodd Trail, which is also a property on the other side of the Greenway. And I want to ask you guys, as part of the Planning Commission, have you had a chance to walk along the Greenway on the Cason Trailhead recently? Has anybody been out there?
I have.
You have?
Yeah.
Have you walked down past the bridge?
And you can just make your comments, and we'll answer all your questions at the end of the public hearing.
So if you have walked that path, you'll notice that what used to be greenery is now freeway. And, you know, I understand that there is already rezoning for the commercial property there, as was mentioned ahead of time. But it was mentioned that the property on the other side of the Greenway is RS10. I do want to point out that there is a petition immediately, and I think it's important to consider everything when talking about this, to rezone that RS10 to a condo rezoning as well. But I want to bring it back to what I think is most important, is where is our smart development plan? We spent $750,000 on the Murphysboro 2035 comprehensive plan, which has already laid out a use for this. How does a factory along our greenway improve our community? There are many warehouses and commercial properties that remain empty currently, and right now a developer is approaching the commission to approve a factory along our greenway, right next to residential property. The only benefit that I can see is that this may perhaps make Blue Sky Development and Brian Burns, his high-end condos, less attractive for the prospective buyers that he's hoping to attract when their greenway view is now impacted by factory towers. So I just want you to consider who we are as a community and what we want Murphysboro to be as you're making the decision whether or not to rezone this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. Hello.
My name's Craig Higgins. I live at 718 Oakwood Circle in Murphysboro, 37128. And I'm just looking at the list of the things that might be allowed under the change, and it's very large, it's very varied, from manufacture, storage, and distribution of abrasive products, asbestos products, alcoholic beverage, automobile manufacture, dismantling, automobile recycling, I don't know how the public can comment or know how to respond when nobody will tell us what it is that is planned for that space. It seems unusual that they would come and ask for a specific change to allow for manufacture and not have any idea of what it is they're going to manufacture there. So why can't they just tell us and tell you? I don't know how you guys can make a decision on this change without knowing what it is that they're going to manufacture there? Have they given anybody any indication what it is they're going to use the space for? And I think that from a disclosure standpoint, if they're going to ask for a change and then invite public scrutiny, that we should be allowed to know what it is that they're planning on using the space for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Chris Spence. I live at 1969 Stony Meadow Drive. I'm here tonight opposing the zoning change. I believe that this area is not best suited for any type of manufacturing at all. We need better information on what type of manufacturing activity will take place. This property backs up to not only to an environmentally sensitive, flood-prone green space, but also a mature neighborhood with several hundred homes just across the river. I could be wrong, but it's my understanding that there is land currently zoned to meet this company's need. I walk and run and bike this section of the Greenway and have for many years. This used to be one of the most peaceful parts and one of my favorite spots to visit. Now when I run over the bridge located near the Cason Trail entrance, all I see is the interstate and cleared land. There was once a buffer of vegetation that would dampen the roar of the cars and trucks. Now it's wide open and you can clearly hear and see all the traffic. My main concern is if you approve the zoning change, that I will no longer be able to hear the passing 18-wheelers, cars, motorcycles racing by that I've grown so fond of. Now all I hear will be the heavy machinery and see the glow of the industrial lights needed to operate such a facility. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spence. Anyone else over there? Okay. We'll close the public hearing and ask for comments, questions from the Planning Commission. And Mr. Taylor, you got a little presentation or discussion for us?
Did not prepare a presentation, but I did hear a couple of questions that I can't tell you who the user is,
Okay.
but the reason that we've requested the general industrial is because our user will be doing some work with metals. That work will be indoors, and the light industrial that's currently zoned there does not allow for that particular use, and whereas the general industrial does. So this particular user is located and does all their work indoors. They will have some trucks that would be on the exterior, but it is because of the metal works that we are requesting that. And I think it's important to note the greenway through this section is on the opposite side of the river. There are existing buffers through the water quality protection area on both sides of the river that we will leave in place. And there will be a road that will be constructed between this and the river as well. So there will still be existing buffers through this section.
Any questions for Mr. Taylor? Okay, thank you. Thoughts? Comments? A motion? Questions?
I'll just make a general comment related to, I know there's a lot of discussion about the green space in this area, and to just kind of point out, of course, the greenway is on the other side of the river in some sections of this. But as Mr. Taylor mentioned, and we can talk about this some, but there are very specific protections between the waterway and that buffer zone. Beyond that, what is really important to remember is that is private property. It does not belong to the city. It is not part of the greenway. It is privately owned property. And so those trees that are there that have created a buffer belong to someone. They don't belong to everyone. They belong to someone very specifically. So no different than a tree in your yard or my yard. So I don't have use of those trees for my personal benefit, just like everyone doesn't have use for those trees for your personal benefit. So that's just a generic, broad statement that I know we talk about a lot. We'll talk about it more. But with regard to the impact of this specific need, as far as the industrial GI zoning, I think it gives us an opportunity with a unique opportunity with a company that we feel, if we can do this, would be good for Murphysboro. I know there may be frustration that everyone doesn't have all of that information, but if it were possible to do that, we would do that. But there are reasons that you can't do that sometimes. And I think, you know, if when you say factory, what I see in factory is, you know, an enormous 5-story building with a big tank pumping stuff into the river. That's not really what we're talking about here. You know, I think there has to be a certain amount of trust with the leaders and the staff that we would not do that, and some accountability on the back end as well. So from what I know of this, I'm very comfortable with it. I'm very comfortable making a motion to approve the zoning change, but I don't want to cut us short on comments for other people that would like to comment as well.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
To your point, Mr. Martin, I agree with you. We're looking at going from light industrial to general industrial. It's not a significant change. There is one part of manufacturing that is needed in order to, for this particular business to operate on this property, and basically Mr. Taylor's just told you what it is. And so I don't think there's really much different of what they're asking for and what could be built tomorrow as far as a light industrial. So I agree with what you're saying about the trees and stuff along the greenway. The city does own our section of the greenway, and contrary to what you might read on Facebook or other social media, the city is not selling off any of its property. The city is doing everything they can to preserve our linear park and to make it as enjoyable as we possibly can. And so that's all protected. This particular facility will be under the same restrictions of any other industrial property, and the release of any type of chemicals or odors or anything that would come along with an industrial project, whether it's light industrial, general industrial, they're regulated, and we would see to it that those would be enforced, and that it would have as little impact as far as lighting and stuff that one of the gentlemen referred to. That's something that really can be controlled as far as how the light leaves the property. So there's some things that I understand the concern and the unknown part of it, and the fear of the unknown. But this particular project is truly an economic driver, and knowing that, I understand that it creates several high-paying jobs if it's comes to fruition. So with the information that we have gotten, and we wish we could give more, I think I'm comfortable with being able to make a positive decision on this.
Ms. Jones, can I make just a quick response to one of the individuals who spoke, just for our record to clarify? I do want to point out that manufacture of asbestos products and auto dismantling, neither of those uses are permitted in the general industrial district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anstey.
If there are no questions, I'll make a motion to approve pending any staff comments.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming out tonight. We have staff reports and other business, and Ms. Green, you have some staff reports or other business.
Yes, ma'am, I have one item, and I'll pass this around. Here. You did consider an item during your July 10th meeting and recommended approval of it. And since that time, the applicant's representatives approached me and wanted to make a change. I think the change is relatively small. However, I felt more comfortable getting your feedback regarding this change prior to it going to City Council for public hearing, and that would be later this month. So this was the next available meeting when I had to bring it up, and it's for the Shelton Crossing PRD. If you turn to the third page, you can see the plan that was approved on July 10th. The fourth page shows you the proposed plan. If you can find proposed drive B on the currently approved plan, you can see that's where the change is proposed to be located. So they're actually requesting to remove private drive B and then reorient those structures along the main drive. That also changes the shape of the expected shape, since it hasn't been engineered at this point, of the detention ponds to more of an L shape. So hopefully you've been able to identify the change. That would eliminate the construction costs associated with building a road, particularly a one-sided road. The change is relatively small. However, I do recollect conversations about those units and their value as they would face that detention pond. And so since I recalled that specific conversation, I wanted to make sure this came back before you. We have Mr. Taylor here who's representing the applicant. They prepared a letter, of course, that outlines the changes and the proposed plans. I did mention that because these are townhomes and there's a very, very small patio in the back, and that tends to be where folks who live in patios relax, that I was concerned, and like other projects with the just falling right into a detention or retention pond. Generally, I require some type of fencing and landscaping, but these units are already designed with a 5-foot privacy fence, and they want to just maintain that along the back of the units. Originally, I had suggested like a black aluminum fence with shrubs, but they're going to maintain that white fence that's behind all of the units. I would like to get your feedback. If you're in favor of it, we don't need a motion, just in the past we've called it a blessing. I don't know a better term than that. Mr. Ives maybe could provide one to me, but in the past we've said blessing. Mr. Taylor, did you have anything you wanted to add regarding your request?
No, I couldn't have said it any better myself.
Thank you.
Earn my money now.
You have earned your money.
And based on the client here, I will abstain from any discussion and blessing on this.
I'm not going to bless anything, but I will say I like it, and I think it's an improvement to the plan. I think it's a good design to improve what some concerns had been expressed.
Any other comments?
I'll go on the records with Eddie and say I like the design of it ultimately better. I feel like it's more inviting when you come into the neighborhood. I feel like that's a better thing. And for the residents that are in Shelton Square, I feel like I'd rather see a detention pond in the back of a condo. So again, I think it's an overall good improvement.
I agree.
I think really all I need are nods. If you are okay with it, then a yes. Okay, great.
Question.
Unanimous?
Question.
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 Affirmative, except for one.
I gotta have one question. On the back of the units that have been turned, is there any kind of buffer there? I know we had discussion on
the rear of
buffers.
those units?
Yeah.
So they will have a fenced-in patio. It's fully enclosed.
Okay.
And then the buffer will be on the other side of the pond. That'll actually screen our development from
But they will
Shelton.
so kids couldn't run out to the pond, so they'll have a fence in
There will be flat spots back there, so it's not a drop-off at the back. So they can, if they want to go out the back of their patio and walk around, they can. So there won't be a straight drop right there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So, Warren, you giving the nod?
I went up. I haven't went down.
Oh, okay.
can only imagine what the people on TV are.
Yes, I'm giving a nod.
All right, Ms. Green, does that get you what you need?
That gets me what I need, thank you.
All right. Do we have any others? Mr. Anthony?
I have nothing. Just want to remind you, and I'll send out more information soon, September 27th is when we've scheduled our half-day retreat for Carolyn's as reserved the wilderness station for us out at Barfield Crescent Park. And we're looking very forward to it and have a lot of things to talk about.
Wonderful.
What date? September 27th.
September 27th. All right, any other staff reports? Any other business? All right, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.